Good morning, Surf Coast Chapel, and a great, enthusiastic, happy Father's Day to all the fathers who have joined us this morning. We thank God for you. Your role is incredibly important, if I don't say so myself. Fathers, God bless you. Keep being bold men. Keep serving the Lord in the context of raising your family. And regardless of whether you've had the best example of a father or a really challenging version, we are reminded both in the good and the bad of attributes of our Father in heaven. The good remind us of the goodness of our Father, and the bad reminds us of how beneficial having a good Father in heaven is. So I pray that you'll be pointed towards Christ as always and enjoy your celebration today in our service. Well, we're going to continue on our series called Acquainted with Christ. And today we want to look at the grace and truth aspect of Jesus' character. And so there is a theme in the New Testament of Jesus being full of grace and truth. It's referred to a number of times. And Jesus is characterized in this way, that he is full of grace and truth. Now, I want to give you a good example that demonstrates how grace is applied and how truth is applied and how they should work together. This week, Silas made me aware that he got up to go to work one day and he's supposed to start at 5 a.m. It's a bit of a sleep in. Sometimes he starts at 4:30. But on this day, he was starting at 5 a.m. and his alarm went off at the appropriate time. And then the next thing he realized, he woke up and it was 4:59. And in that moment, he realized, I've got 1 minute to get to work. So after a flurry of panic, he just thought, I'm going to call my boss and I'm going to tell him the truth. So he called his boss. He took responsibility and he did the right thing. I'm very proud of him. He did the right thing. He owned up to his mistake and he told the truth to his boss. Now, that is an act of truth. He told the truth. He stood out for what he told the truth. And then he said to his boss, I'll be there in 15 minutes. He scrambled. He got there in 15 minutes. Now, when he got to work, his boss said to him, let's make sure you don't make this a habit. I can't have you coming late to work. You need to make sure you're on time. Get your alarms all set. Don't push them and snooze them and have a sleep in. Come to work, be on time. And so I said, yep, thank you. I won't make a habit of it. He's got a long history of not making a habit of it. Now, what did his boss do? His boss delivered the truth. And so there's another example of truth in action. Now, in that moment, Silas did not lose his job. He is still employed and able to pay board. So he's employed, and so the fact that he still has a job is a grace given to him from his boss. The other thing is, his boss didn't make him suffer through the day. He didn't remind him of his mistake. He didn't say to him, I can't believe you did the wrong thing this morning. He didn't walk around work with bad vibes and just not talking to him and doing all of the nonsense that can sometimes happen. His boss gave him the grace of forgetting it. He said the truth and he moved on. I think that's a great thing to do. Now imagine if for a second, if his boss only gave him grace and said to him, you know what, it doesn't actually matter that you were late to work. That's fine, just come whenever you like. I'm just going to overlook that situation and that's all you need to know. Well, I think the customers that day in the shop may be a little bit miffed if staff members are turning up late, not able to make the beverages, make their coffees and teas and frappes and all the other stuff they make there, the food items, you need to make sure that your staff are on time, but you want to do it with grace. Now, if his boss was all truth and just laid the cold hard facts on people and didn't give grace or give truth gracefully, well, the business would have no staff left after a while, or at a minimum, very low staff morale. And so I commend his boss. I think he's done a great job. And this is a great example of something I've said many times. But grace is the enabling factor to obey. And so the boss delivered the truth. He delivered it with grace. And now Silas is better able to obey that instruction in the future. Now let's look at Jesus in John chapter 1, verse 14. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And we have seen his glory as of the only Son, from the Father, full of grace and truth. Too often, these are not two things that go side by side, maybe in your own life and in our society. Either somebody is more inclined to be full of grace and more gentle and forgiving and nothing's ever a problem, or somebody can be more truthful and, as has been said to Michelle once before by one of her friends, she said, Mish, you are my truthful friend. And we were looking at that thinking, does that mean she's too hard? And she's not. She's a good example of grace and truth. But this is what we want to aim for. We don't want to be just one thing or another thing. You can't just be full of grace and then have truth off to the side. Jesus is the great example for us in that he was full of grace and truth. Oftentimes people try to create an image of God that is not a true representation of his character as found in his word. And so what happens is they say, oh, God would never deliver truth to me in that way. Or, God would only ever be nice to me. He's just forgiving. It doesn't matter the way I live. And what we do when we isolate one part of God's character to the detriment or ignoring all of the other aspects of his character is that we actually create a Jesus in our own image. And that is not the image that we are given of Christ in the scriptures. So we've got to be careful not to do such a thing. Let's keep reading verses 15 to 17. John bore witness about him and cried out, "This was he of whom I said, 'He who comes after me ranks before me, because he was before me.' For from his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ." So through Christ, we have been given the new covenant. And I love the way it's phrased here, is that through Christ we have received grace upon grace. Do you realize that for you to get to this point in your relationship with God, you have to have received grace upon grace upon grace? That is what you have received. You did not get here by your own merit. Even your own belief, your initial belief in God came at God's instruction. And so you've received grace upon grace. I remember when I was a much younger guy and I was driving mum and dad's car. I think it was a little Toyota Camry. And I was on my P plates and I was driving that around town. And I was going down one of the main streets and I saw somebody that I knew. And I may have been inclined to be a bit of a show-off, I thought, oh, I'll show off to these people. And I started doing fishtails in the car and put the back end out this way and the back end out that way. And just, went around the big intersection, put the back out. Just silly, but fun stuff. Okay, I'm going to be honest. I don't drive that way anymore, and you'll find out why. And so I then came to my senses. Maybe that took 30 seconds total. There was not many other cars around at all. And I went down to the lights, indicated, because I'm a law-abiding citizen, indicated to turn right at the lights. And out of nowhere, what do I see in my revision mirror? The police. And they put their lights on. And in that moment, I remember thinking, do I just floor it? Do I just get out of here? And of course, I didn't, but my heart was racing and I was panicked for the trouble. What are they pulling me over for? Maybe they didn't see anything. Maybe I just went too fast. It could just be a random check. And so I pulled over and the police officer came out and he said to me, do you know why I pulled you over today? And I said, well, that depends on how long you were watching me. And he said, well, I saw everything. And he said, what nationality are you? I said, oh, I'm Australian, but I've got Lebanese heritage. My dad's Lebanese and my mum's Australian. And he said, and whose car is this? I said, well, this is their car. He said, how are they going to respond if you get a fine today for your behaviour? And I said, look, to be honest, I don't think they'll care very much. They might be a little bit disappointed, but I really don't think I'm going to get in a lot of trouble. And he said, well, listen, mate, I actually don't believe you. I'm concerned with your father's ethnicity, that you might get in a bit of trouble, and I'm going to let you go. So I'm going to let you go. Don't do that again. And I was completely shocked. I remember praying afterwards and saying, God, I'm not going to do this again. And that grace that police officer gave me in that moment, maybe he just thought, this kid will probably just do it again, who knows. But in actual fact, that did change me that day. That inspired me. You know what? I've given my word. I've said that I won't do this again, and I'm not going to do it again. I'm going to do the right thing. And so just an example of me receiving this grace, and it enabled me to obey in the future. Well, you and I have received grace upon grace from God. And maybe you don't perceive it. Maybe you in error believe that you got to this place by your own merit, that you initiated that relationship with God. And yet that is not what the Bible teaches at all. See, when Jesus operates in grace, he doesn't forget truth. And when Jesus operates in truth, he doesn't forget grace. They come as a package deal. They come together. Now contemplate for a moment, where would you be without the grace of God? But for the grace of God, there go I. When you look at somebody who's really down and out, who's struggling, you've got to think to yourself, if it wasn't for the grace of God, that could be me. I could have been born in a war-torn country. I could have been born incredibly poor or disabled or in any of these things. And of course, God's grace is there even for those who are disadvantaged in life. And so all of us, whether we are doing well, we realize too much is given, much is expected. We have to be those who are thankful to God for the grace he has shown us. Now in Romans chapter 3, verse 10 and 11. Which I clearly did not have marked in my Bible. But anyway, it says, as it is written, none is righteous, no, not one. No one understands, no one seeks God. All have turned aside. Together they have become worthless. No one does good, not even one. See, this is our true spiritual state before God. That is a truth that we have just read. Our true spiritual state before God is that we are not righteous. And if you look across the world, there is nobody who is righteous. In actual fact, it is a miracle that anybody believes in God. And it all comes because of God's goodness and because of His loving initiative with mankind. God loves the world. He is reconciling. We're going to look at that next week. That Jesus is the great mediator between us and God. God reconciles mankind to Himself because of His great love. And that doesn't invalidate the fact that He is righteous and that He is the judge of the living and the dead, and that there is a moral standard that we could never live up to. And yet God has circumvented that by His own life and by His perfection. Now in Romans chapter 6, which is the scripture that I had marked, Romans chapter 6 verse 13 says, "Do not present your members to sin as instruments for unrighteousness, but present yourselves to God as those who have been brought from death to life, and your members to God as instruments for righteousness. For sin will have no dominion over you, since you are not under law, but under grace." And so we read earlier that Jesus is full of grace and truth, and He has given to us the new covenant. Not the law of Moses, but He has given us this new covenant in Himself. And so we are under grace, not under law. How good is that to understand that we're not under the law? We're not judged by the law, but we are under grace. Such an incredible, amazing blessing for us as believers. And yet, some people take that as a license to sin. You know what? I'm under grace, and therefore I can just do whatever I want. I'm under grace. Hey, I'm under grace, brother. Don't judge me. I'm under grace. It is popular in modern day Christianity, but it is not biblical at all. You know, we are those who are supposed to strive to make sure that sin does not have dominion over our life. And yet, we will sin. We will sin even as Christians. But we are promised here that that sin will not have dominion over us. We actually need to spiritually count ourselves dead to sin and alive in Christ. That's the predisposition we must have. So to be a believer who is under grace, not law, we've got to understand that our old life is dead and buried, and before God we are a new creation. And yet we still wrestle with this flesh and blood, and we still will let ourselves and our Messiah down. And yet what we need to do is crucify our sinful desires so that sin would not reign in our mortal body. This is our good and acceptable worship to God. That we would in fact surrender what our flesh desires here so that we would submit to God's will. And it is only the mechanism of the grace of Jesus Christ that allows us to grow and grow even though we sin and fail and fall short of serving God the way we ought to. So thank God today for His wonderful grace. Think about the woman caught in adultery. She's brought before Jesus in John chapter 8. And He's teaching, and the Pharisees come and they go hunt down this woman. They go looking for an adulteress. What a weird thing to hunt. We're going to hunt adulteresses today. They go and find this adulteress who's obviously sleeping around. They don't bring the guy back. He gets a free pass for some strange reason. But they drag this woman before Jesus and they say to him, this woman was caught in the very act of adultery. And under the law, she should be stoned. What say you? Now keep in context. Jesus is full of grace and truth. How can he be gracious and not violate God's standard of truth? John chapter 8, verse 7 to 11. And as they continued to ask him, he stood up and said to them, let him who is without sin cast the first stone. I tell you, I can see that I'm going to run out of time. I wish I had time to explain some extra things that I'd studied on that particular thing. Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her. And once more he bent down and wrote on the ground. But when they heard it, they went away one by one, beginning with the older ones, and Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. Jesus stood up and said to her, woman, where are they? Or some other versions say, where are your accusers? Has no one condemned you? She said, no one, Lord. I bet she was shocked. Nobody has condemned me. This is shocking. She knew she was guilty. Jesus knew she was guilty. The Pharisees knew she was guilty, and yet nobody was there with the legal right to accuse and condemn her. And Jesus said, neither do I condemn you. Now, Jesus did have the legal standing to condemn her because of his perfection, and yet he says, go from now and sin no more. We need to be able to understand that the grace of Christ enables us to obey, even though our righteousness is as filthy rags, even though we sin and we fall short and we are imperfect people. That does not excuse us to continue to sin or to not live for righteousness according to God's standard of truth. So I want to leave you with that challenge. What kind of person are you? Are you someone who just favors the grace and avoids the truth? Are you someone who favors truth and avoids grace? If we veer off either way, we are not being as Christ-like as we can be. So I want to encourage you with that today. Be more like Christ and honor him and example him to a world that desperately needs the grace of God, also in the context of the truth that he brings. God bless you. Take care. Happy Father's Day. And I look forward to preaching to you next week.